Hello, hello. Good morning, everyone. I'll just wait a few more minutes until we have more people joining. I hope everyone's doing well, staying cool in the summer heat. Um, awesome. We have a few more people coming in. Great. All right. Let's get started then. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining me this morning. I am Alicia from the Kolsquare team. Over the next 20 minutes or so, I wanted to make a case that might sound counterintuitive at first. Compliance isn't the cost of doing influencer marketing well. It's increasingly the thing that separates the brands who get it and who get it right from the ones who end up in a headline they didn't want. So we'll move through 5 areas quite swiftly, where the real risk sits, what it costs when it goes wrong, why creator selection is a brand decision and not admin, and what the data tells us about transparency and performance, and how to scale all of this without losing the kind of, I guess, the rigor and the strength along the way as well. So we'll stay in the numbers, and yeah, there are a few today worth writing down. So have a pen and paper nearby. Awesome. Just a quick overview of what we'll cover today to shape the session. We'll start with the gap between how important brand safety feels and how much time teams actually give it. Then we'll look at 2 real campaigns that show what happens when the gap isn't closed. And from there, we'll reframe creator selection as a performance decision. And then we'll look at the data, what the data says about transparency, specifically a 6-month analysis that Kolsquare ran across 5 European markets as well as the UK. And then we'll talk about scaling all of this without adding the headcount. And we'll close with a practical checklist you can hold your own program against. So, yeah, let's start with the gap. So here, the first number is 4.9%, right? So that's a proportion of marketers who cite brand safety as a top challenge, according to the Influencer Marketing Hub's 2026 research. Now hold that one next to this number, 55%. That's the proportion of 18 to 34-year-olds who've stopped buying from a brand entirely over a values clash, according to the Edelman Trust Barometer. So sit with that gap for a second. Fewer than 1 in 20 marketers rank brand safety as a top concern, yet more than half of younger consumers will walk away from a brand who exactly has that issue. So that's not a small mismatch. The gap where most campaigns fail, and it's rarely visible until a campaign has already gone live. So the reason it stays hidden is quite straightforward. Brand safety doesn't show up as a line item until something breaks, right? So the reach, engagement, conversions, those get tracked every week. Values alignment gets checked once, if at all, right? So usually right at the start of the partnership, and then it doesn't really get revisited again. And so that's the gap. And we'll be able to see next what falling into it actually costs. So the cost of getting it wrong. So we have 2 examples here, and they're both instructive for different reasons. The first is Adidas and Ye. When Adidas ended that partnership following the anti-Semitic comments, the impact was estimated at $250 million, and that's not a fine. Then that's not a fine or a PR budget line, right? That's the direct financial consequence of one relationship gone wrong. And the root cause, though, is like part worth sitting with. It wasn't that nobody saw the risk. It's the relationship that had been treated as a media buy rather than a brand partnership. And we feel like a media buy gets evaluated on reach and cost per impression. And a brand partnership needs to be evaluated on whether this person's values, history, future behavior are something you're willing to be associated with indefinitely as well. In a way, a media placement never is, if we really think about it. And so the second example is smaller in scale, but it's sharper in what it reveals. So Pink Honey ran a brand journey where 17 out of 17 influencers involved were Caucasian or white. And the response was immediate. There was a boycott and zero return for the brands involved. And the root cause here wasn't malicious, it wasn't malice, it was selection without evaluating whether the creator mix actually reflected the brand's values. Nobody sat down and decided to exclude anyone. Nobody checked whether they had either. So both cases point to the same underlying failure. It's treating the creator selection as a logistics task rather than a brand decision, which actually brings us straight to the next slide. Choosing the creator is the brand decision. So here's a sentence I'd like you to take away from this whole session, right? If nothing else, the creator you choose is the first performance decision, and it's not a preliminary step. So most teams still treat creator selection as a thing that happens before the real work starts. So the briefing, the content, the reporting. But in practice, selection is where the outcome is already decided. There are three layers worth checking every time. So the quantitative layer is the one most teams already do, and I'm sure you all do it already, is the looking at the real engagement rates, compliance scores, credibility scores. And that tells you something about, the audience quality that they have. And a look at brand collaboration history is also a good layer to look at. The qualitative layer is the second one. And this is where it kind of gets more interesting and where the spreadsheets kind of fail short. The creator's personal values, their tone, their content style, how they actually relate to their own community, and who else they're working with right now, I think says a lot about the creator. And then we have the third one where there are the risk signals, right? So which are the ones that get missed under time pressure: inflated followers, bot activity, inconsistent disclosures, or past sponsored content. And yeah, you can kind of see if a creator is juggling far too many simultaneous brand deals as well, or content that quietly contradicts what your brand stands for. So if you miss any of these three layers, I think you're not choosing the creator, you're kind of choosing a risk profile without knowing it. So those are the three main things definitely to look out for in your next program. Awesome. Brings us to the next part. So does any of this actually pay off, or is it simply the responsible thing to do, right? This is the million-dollar question. And we looked at this directly, and we actually ran an analysis of sponsored reels and in-feed content across France, Germany, Italy, Spain, and the UK. And over the 6 months to March 2026, the focus was kind of on long-term collaborations versus the one-off posts. And we saw that the pattern was consistent. There was a lot of evaluation leads to a creator with a genuinely engaged audience, which builds the audience trust, which drives better performance, which in turn generates richer data for the next round. So it's a loop and not really a one-time decision. So we found that three numbers back this up. 80% of consumers say non-transparent influencers destroy trust outright. 70% of people worldwide hold that researchers call an insular trust mindset, meaning they trust people closer to their own circle far more readily than distant institutions or brands, corporations, organizations, etc. And creators themselves now rank shared values above pay as their number one priority when choosing who to work with. And this is huge. So if you kind of put those together, and the commercial argument and the ethical point in exactly the same direction, we can kind of clearly see that transparency isn't a constraint on the performance, right? In this data, it's almost a precondition for it, which is very, very interesting. All right. So now the obvious objection. This all sounds sensible at a smaller scale, right? But what happens when a program is running in the hundreds of creator relationships at once? The pressure gets very real, right? As we see here, 75% of European marketers expect to work with more creators in 2026 than they did in 2025. So search and evaluation is already the most outsourced function in the industry at around 19.4% of teams. And when teams are stretched, the evaluation itself gets thinner, right? So half of marketers spend just 30 minutes reviewing a creator before signing off. Spreadsheets, frankly, can't keep up with that volume, right? So here's the useful reframe that you can take away is it's an infrastructure problem. It won't be a resourcing problem. So three things to solve it without kind of adding head count is AI powered discovery, where a compliance score and credibility score are built directly into search rather than checked afterwards as a separate step. So a centralized management, so briefings, communications, results all sit in one place instead of across different people's emails and threads and trackers and this and that. And then, of course, automated reporting, right? So if you have real time KPIs, you can export it straight through PowerPoints, find the trends and patterns quite quickly. But yeah, I just want to reiterate here that none of this replaces the judgment. I think it just means the judgment gets applied consistently at whatever scale the program needs to run at, right? Awesome. So we're already at the checklist part. So we're running a lot ahead of time. Looks like this will just be a quick 15-minute one for you all, which is great. So let's take a look at what we have here. So practically, what does good look like this year, right? Here's the checklist we'd suggest holding your own program against. On creator selection, creators selected on values and content and not just the follower count. A full history audit before any outreach happens. Compliance score and credibility score checked at every stage. And audience sentiment analysis before anything gets signed. That's one of them. On the campaign management, the obvious things are a clear briefing on brand values for every single creator, content review and approval before anything goes live. I think we all know this one. It's talked about very often. Other ones would be disclosure requirements built into the contracts from day one, so not added as an afterthought later on once everything's been made. And then continuous monitoring for the length of the collaboration and not a one off check. Another one is measurement. So, in this sense, we mean by comparing long term collaborations to one off campaigns directly, keeping a centralized record of performance and history per creator, and tracking how long your team actually spends evaluating each one. And where does your own program sit against that, right? So, early stage, growing, or mature. Most teams we talk to are honest to say it depends on which of those three columns you're looking at. The strategy that closes the gap looks different depending on the program size, which is exactly what our full report on our brand safety goes into. If you want to take a look at that after today. And yeah, this is just the gist of that. So, last one liner to leave you with today is brand safety is the most important performance decision in your influencer marketing program. It's not a compliance step that sits alongside performance. It's the performance decision itself, and a lot of the longevity of campaigns really rely on protecting your brand and your creators as well. So 3 words to hold on to is evaluate, because selection accounts for 80% of the outcome before a single piece of content is even briefed. Comply, because transparency equals performance and the data confirms it, not just a theory, but in what we measure directly. Thirdly, scale, because the answer to more volume is infrastructure. It's not more manual effort from a team that's already stretched. And that is it for us today. Thank you for your time this morning. Short and sweet. We love a good, quick morning webinar. So I hope you found this very useful and you can take it into your next campaigns already. And if you would like to go into more deep detail on any of this, please follow us on socials. You can email me straight away. You'll get a little email from me after this webinar as well for a full webinar replay, so you can send it to your colleagues, and also an invite to the next webinar. So stay tuned for that one. It'll be a really exciting one with a special guest as well. So yeah, thank you very much, everyone. Have a great day.